Welcome back. This is Jason Seacrest. We're going to go through a little teddy bear in our Adobe Illustrator, and we are going to go almost through step 4 today. We're going to kind of change up a little bit with the coloring. We're going to also change up the lines a little bit, so this is going to be a little bit different. And we're just going to walk you right through the process. So if you're brand new to this, we're going to go step by step so you can just follow along at home. So the first thing I want you to do is just go File, New. Pretty much our standard size for all of our tutorials, especially all the new ones, are going to be 5x5. I am doing RGB today. Next, I want you to go File, Place, and look for your teddy bear. So the first thing I did is I placed it. Next, I did create a template layer, and that's going to lock it out and give it a 50% opacity. And then I'm going to do a new layer above it called inking. Let's get rid of the stroke, or let's get rid of the fill. I want a black stroke of just 1 point. And then all we're going to do is I am going to pull and tear off some of these menus just so you can see what tools we are working with. You do not necessarily have to do this, but I just like that you will be able to see as each tool lights up, you'll be able to kind of see what I'm actually working with. Alright, I think we're ready to go. Let's go right through it. Now, you will see the anchor points, you will also see the handles, and all we're going to do is go straight lines. We are not doing anything. Click P, that is the pen tool. Next, I'm going to go Shift C, and I'm basically creating the handles. So I'm pulling those out until they goes in the direction I want. The little trick is just hang on to it until you figure out what direction it's going in. And my left hand is actually just hanging out on the left hand side of my keyboard. Click P to reset, and I'm just clicking on the anchor points. Shift C. I'm going to let go. So if you ever see handles that are longer or possibly going in different directions, you are able to let go. So this is our way of doing it, so you don't have to be doing Alt or Option or anything like that while you're actually using the pen tool. So you're just going to come back, much easier, and our 2 ears are done. That's how easy it was. So I'm going to zoom out a tiny bit, and we're going to start working on the head. And again, same exact thing. Anytime you think you see a anchor point, again, space bar is so you can move. Click P again, just click on that just in case it reset. Okay, and we're just going to finish those up. Again, Shift C. We're just clicking, dragging them out. Again, spacebar to move. Major thing when we're doing our tutorials here is just keep an eye on where the handles are. Notice that I'm still on Shift C. And you can pretty much modify them as much as you wanted to as well. So this is just so you can get pretty close to what we're looking at. Alright, let's do the ellipse. Now for the anchor point, I have some ovals. For this one, I'm actually going to be doing some just regular circles. And then also, I'm going to kind of do some split where it's a little bit more of a iris type of a scenario. I am not going to keep that. So if you like the idea of just kind of the highlights, I would recommend that as you're going through. So you might be able to tell that as you're going through. But just so you can kind of see what I'm doing, I'm placing in front. So I copied in front again, and then I basically did our little pathfinder, and now I'm able to color kind of that outside shape. So the major trick with pathfinder is you have to copy paste twice, so you have 2 new shapes, so you also maintain your last one. So that's kind of the idea here. And then I'm going to do a highlight, and just so you guys are aware of why I'm skipping over this is I completely delete it by the time we're done with it. So I just keep it in a simple black, and I keep my highlights. So that does disappear, and you'll actually see that in the example that we get rid of the blue. Alright, let's select all. I'm going to group it. That's just right click, hold down Alt, and if you guys can kind of see the little green lines popping up, I do have the smart guides on, and I'm also just going to double check here that they are in fact centered, and I'm just going to drop those down. Alright, looks good. Let's keep it going. Click P, go back to the pen tool, click on your anchors. Let's flip these. I do not want a fill. Go back to Shift C. Now, if you go back to the A, just be aware that it does kind of move them together. If you want to stay on Shift C, so this one is going to be Shift C. A lot of the times I like going back to A just because I think it's a smoother transition. If you could do too much with Shift C, a lot of times you'll get these really kind of sharp edges as soon as you transition. Alright, do all of the anchor points, Shift C. This one's going to have a longer top. Shift C is still selected, by the way. Let's do the top one first. I'm focusing on the top, and then we're going to come back down. You can kind of see it hiding on that line. And all I'm looking to do is kind of round that out a little bit more than what was on the anchor point. Now, if you ever need to go back to any of the anchor points and or the handles, just white arrow, select on your anchor point, and you'll be able to do it that way. Alright, so let's flip that over to black. So that is a black fill, ellipse, I'm going to copy and paste in front the nose. So I have the oval, and then I also have a duplicate copy of the nose. And so then I can just color that highlight shape. Major thing that people forget is to duplicate the base shape. That is one of the major things that's happened. So if all of a sudden everything disappears and you're just left with that little football shape, you forgot to duplicate the nose. So you'll have actually two noses, or two nose shapes, and then you'll have that ellipse. So that Pathfinder, I think, is usually a little bit more complicated, just because there's always a hidden shape that most of you guys can't see. So that's a little bit more tricky to do on the path or on the videos. Hold down Alt Option. And then just so you guys can kind of see what's happening with the anchor point guide, is everything is in stroke, and so you'll actually get a little bit more, it'll look a little bit bigger. So once we went back to just fills and no stroke, it'll actually shrink up those whisker dots. And you guys can totally shrink those up. You can change shapes if you like ovals. That's kind of a fun thing, or more of a hollow, or like a U shape. That's kind of fun as well. Let's move it up. Go back to P. And then just so you can also see that I am finishing that shape just so it fills nicely. So let's just flip it so we can actually see all of our anchors and see where we're trying to aim with this. Hold down Shift C again. And I'm looking at the bottom shape. Good. Shift C is still selected. Let's drop that down. Drag that out. Good, I'm on the black arrow right now. So we're going to select our mouth, hold down Alt Option. Let's do the long way. Copy, paste in front. Alt Option will do the same thing, which is basically what we're looking for is a copy. Paste in front. And what we're looking for is just that side of the mouth. Okay, so again, we're going to be doing Pathfinder. So the major little trick is we have this weird new shape. Double check that you have copied and pasted the mouth twice. So the original mouth shape, you should have already copied and pasted. New shape again, and then we should have it do it. So again, that little copy and paste of the original mouth is what people most of the time forget. So you want, that's what it's going to be subtracting from. So mouth, do it again, and then we're basically pasting it another time so that it'll be like 3 in a row, and then we're basically moving it. All right, let's do our anchors. In the original anchor point, there was a Pathfinder, and I went back to just using lines since it's a little bit easier. Some of you might be able to tell that I usually try to avoid as much as possible Pathfinder, especially if you guys are learning. All right, I do want that to kind of come under the tongue a little bit more. Go P, Shift C. Drag that out, Shift C again. Shift C for the bottom of the tongue. And again, if you're ever looking to come back and modify points, just click A, that's the white arrow, and then you can always come back and modify. Alright, I'm just going to connect this bottom point. This is on P, by the way. We're going to come right back, shifts. Basically, we're going to go C. C is your scissor. And we're just going to delete that. So scissor, and we're just going to do a little snip snip. And that's going to come back through. Just remember, or if you want to zoom in, I think this is a little bit more helpful. If you zoom in, the tendency of not deleting an anchor point will be there. So if it ever yells at you, it's usually saying, hey, for the scissor tool, it doesn't want you to use it on a anchor point. All right, let's go back to P. Click on your anchor points. Okay, finish them off, Shift C. And if it ever goes crazy on one end, just kind of focus on one at a time, and you can always come back and fix it. All we're doing is just connecting the anchor points. So we're looking for the handles. Drag that one over. You can kind of see that I'm on A. If you want a sharper edge, Shift C. So notice I'm on Shift C now. Alright, looking good. Click on those anchor points, Shift C. Let's do the bottom one first. I'm still on Shift C, by the way. A little bit sharper of an edge. Most of the time, if you see handles that are going in different directions, that's going to give you a sharper type of a transition. So if you like that, keep on Shift C. If you want more of a smooth transition, that would be a good signal to use the white arrow as you're modifying those points. So just kind of be aware of that there's kind of two different ways you can do it. Shift C, you'll get a little bit of a sharper transition, or you can just keep it with A. Okay, do our seam, go to P, We're just doing that right leg. Hold down shift, by the way, when you do that bottom. Shift, shift, shift. Shift will keep it nice and straight for you. Alright, shift C. I'm holding down shift, by the way, to keep that nice and straight. Let's just do that little one right there. Looks good. Spacebar. Click P. Click, hold shift, nice and straight. Good, shift C. As you're pulling, hold down shift to keep it nice and straight. Looks good. Let's do this seam. Shift C. Alright, let's do belly. We are almost done. Hard part is almost over. Now I'm going to continue this one up. And that just so when we start doing our color, we're going to do a little bit different of a process with coloring today. And that's just so that edge stays. So if I want a different color transition, that I have that line ready to go. Okay, shift C. Let's do the belly seam. Alright. Notice I'm on the white arrow, by the way. Click P. Belly seam. I'm focusing on that top handle. Shift C. Drag down. Let's do the face. Now I'm going to keep this one a little bit longer, and the reasons for that is I want the line to continue through the mouth without changing, so when we start adding our brushes, that it doesn't stop. So I want that thickness to continue all the way down. Okay, just click on those anchors. Let's connect it. Looks good. Shift C. Now since I do want some sharp edges, you're going to notice that a lot of those handles are going in different directions. So just go one at a time. It's going to go a little bit funky on you. No worries. And then also we are going to come back and modify that. I do want the top to kind of line up with that bottom. But as we start adding in all of our brushes, that would be a, we'll modify it as that goes. All right, let's duplicate this out. Now this top layer is still going to be the inking. This bottom layer, that's going to be our flat color. So we're going to kind of modify this a little bit. So just say flat color. Looks good. And what we're looking to do is kind of figure out if we need to get rid of anything. Okay. Now since we're going to start to do the coloring, let's place in our teddy bear color, teddy bear palette. Let's just pull that over. Alright, let's open up our swatches. And this process is very, very easy. Just click I or the eyedropper. Get our swatch and then just pull it right on up. And I'm just dragging it right on up. So the eyedropper is still selected. And that's how we're able to select all of our colors, drag them up. And again, if ever you guys want to change up the color palette, I always use Adobe Cooler or Adobe Color, I believe it is now. So it has modified the name of it. And so you guys can just go in, type in teddy bear, see what pops up. If you want to type in something different, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Okay, so we are on this base layer, and I basically am looking for no fill, no stroke. Let's go to Live Paint, Make. So again, I'm on the flat color layer. Click on K, and I'm just going to be able to come in and color in all of my major shapes. Now, since there are different lines in there, you are going to notice that it kind of breaks some of this up. But it will be a little bit easier than just flipping to your fills. So the fills don't necessarily play out as neatly. So if you guys want to test that out, you're more than welcome to. But it doesn't necessarily work the way you think it's going to. And all I'm doing is I'm just going to be coloring. Anytime there's a gap or a space or there's another line, just be aware that it is going to separate those. So you're just going to have to click on each one, and then you'll be able to color it the way you want. Now what we are looking for is we just want to make sure that all of our colors and all of our areas are filled in right now. So it doesn't necessarily matter if all of the colors are the way we want yet. We just basically want to have everything filled in, so that is creating shapes. So not only is it coloring it, but it's also creating a new shape, so we don't have to come back and do anything with the pen tool. It automatically does it for us. Alright, so we can basically lock out that flat color. We have our strokes above. And we're going to duplicate this guy out. Now I'm going to lock out and just hide our original. This top layer is where we're going to start to add in our brushes. So this is where our cartoon brushes are going to come back in. And what we're looking to do is basically, I just want to give you a couple different ways of coloring. I'm not saying this way is any more efficient, but I think it just lets you guys kind of see some different ways of doing it. And then also, as we start to add in our lines here, you're going to notice that we're going to basically have a lot of open spaces. So this is so we can start to have our lines ready to go. And some of you might be able to tell in, let's say if I say, a major one I can think of is like Calvin and Hobbes. There's some cartoon strips that have a lot of open areas, especially for their line work. So using that live paint bucket doesn't necessarily work because there's so many openings. So what we are looking to do is bring in our cartoon brushes. All right, let's just do this. So I want, just so you can kind of see it, if I click on it, everything will go together. Now what we are looking for is I want to kind of use our highlight in the brushwork itself. So that is what I am looking to do. Okay, so we're still just using the same process, but what we're going to start to modify is we want kind of gaps. So instead of everything being the same, we're going to zoom in just so you can see what I'm talking about here. And we're going to go C. This is our scissor tool, by the way. And I'm looking for some open gaps. And I'm just going to delete out that line. And right now we still have that fat to fat. So that's where we're going to start to modify these, where it's going to go fat to taper. And some of you will be able to kind of see that there's that little opening, and why we duplicated that line early and why we wanted to color it is so those lines still match up later. So if I wanted to come back and if I changed up, let's say if I didn't duplicate out that original line layer, basically it would be very hard. There'd be way too many openings to do this with for the live paint bucket. So I think this is a very, very easy way of getting kind of that open line work. You just have to kind of pay attention to where you want the openings to go. And all we are doing is going C, which is our scissor tool. I'm cutting along the path. Notice I'm also avoiding anchor points. And just so everyone is also aware, is I'm still on the brush layer. The color layer is locked below it. let's just drop that down. Now this method will actually work quite well. I'm going to keep everything pretty black. I'm just a bigger fan of black lines, but if this method would actually work quite well if you did either a tint and or a shade with any of these lines. So this would be a great method for that. I'm just holding down shift. I'm just looking at any of the ones I just want tapered on both ends. And all I'm thinking of is kind of like a light source. Where would that be hitting? That would still make sense using all of the brushwork. Now, anytime we're doing the custom, basically the fill layer as well as the custom brushes, those are all using kind of the middle or a centered stroke line, just so everyone is aware. So I did not align the stroke to the far side, inside, or anything like that. It was just defaulted. We did not do anything with that. So you can kind of see like that would be a good area if you wanted to do just the belly color rather than black. That would be kind of a cool way of doing it too. So this method is pretty flexible, especially on what type of colors you're going to be using. So that's kind of what I wanted to show, some different approaches here, because I know that there was a lot of people that were asking about colored lines. And also, if you are doing anything with our cartoon brushes, just be aware that there is a colorization mode setting as you're adding a new art brush. So just click on tint. I believe tint and or shade will actually work with it, but you'll be able to actually add colors as you are building this up rather than black. So if you do none, you'll notice that it does not want to color or change up the colors as you're still in the stroke. Once you expand, then you can color them whatever you want. So I do that method more than on the fly, just so everyone is aware. And that method just simply means once everything is expanded out, all the strokes and the brushes are where I want them to go, then I can basically fill them in and color them however I want. Because you'll also notice that if I do tint, there is a little bit of transparency to it. So that's why I usually try to avoid that. All right, save check. And again, if you don't want lines anywhere, just delete them out and or just get rid of the stroke. So on this layer, since we're just dealing with the stroke layer, I can get rid of stuff. And all we're really doing here is modifying the edges to make sure that there's a nice overlap, so when we expand, we start doing our eraser process, that everything is good to go. So I'm going to just duplicate this one out, and that's just so I still have it in stroke form. So that's basically me maintaining all of my strokes before we expand and before we start doing all of our erasing. So I'm selecting everything, go up to the top, let's go Object, Expand, let's zoom in so we can just double check. And the idea is that you should typically be able to see if there are still strokes hanging out there. And all we're going to do is just erase any of the overlap lines. So any type of overlap that we don't want should be pretty obvious. This one is actually pretty clean. So all we're going to do is just come back through, erase everything, and then we'll be able to move on to the next step. So face, arms, any of those little overages, those are where we're going to come through and delete those. Okay, so all I'm doing is changing up those black lines. This is also where I'm going to get rid of the color part of the eyes as well. So I'm just basically adjusting or arranging the color parts. So if you needed to adjust those, but as promised, I'm going to delete the color part of the eyes. I just thought that was a little bit more of a simpler process. Other thing too is things are still pretty much grouped, and I am coming through and I'm coloring some of these seams at this point in time. You will notice that in the example that pretty much the bare seams are staying black in the example. And I think the belly color does go a little bit darker. But again, this is totally personal preference. Everyone is very, very different when it comes to line, what they like, what they don't like. Okay, so here is the trick. I'm using the line tool, and all I'm looking to do is create basically 3 different lines for these stitches. We're going to drop down, and I'm just doing smart guides right now, and I want it to be a little bit fatter in the middle, and then I want it to be tapered. So you're going to be aware that I'm kind of adjusting the direction of the stitchers. I'm going to go up to Object, Blend, Make, and before I do that, we're going to actually do our brushes, because I do want that to do it. Blend, Make, and there is going to be kind of a default, so we're going to go up to Blend. Let's go Blend Options. I'm going to do a specific how many steps. So that's step 7. I do want it to round with the curve as well. I'm going to expand. Okay, I want those to all be the same color. Now I am going to do this black again, so it just doesn't really matter what color you're looking to do. Now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to ungroup. What I want to do is kind of do it like a cross stitch, just so you can kind of see. So I'm going to take this one just so I can grab one stitch. I'm going to scale it a little bit. I'm going to rotate it. Now I'm going to go Alt Option just to grab another one. And I'm pretty zoomed in, so it's fighting me. Kind of like that snap to point. I don't have snap to point, but I'm just really zoomed in. So as long as it is centered for the most part, you should be good, but it's just a little bit of a variation. And that's really all we're looking for with that. Alright, let's do it 2 more times. So we're basically just going to do the stitches on the right hand side. Now again, I'm just using the left hand tool. And if you guys have a little bit of a gap, just be aware that we did scale that layer a little bit, so we can always just come back and fix that. That is not a big deal. Alright, again, point in the direction you want. Let's drop down the scale a little bit. Let's go Make. And that doesn't do a whole lot, but I like that. So let's do, I did add another one for some odd reason. I'm just going to recolor it. Now again, if you had the brushes set up to take on tints, then yes, you could color it on the fly. So you would not have to expand before coloring. Alright, same thing again. And you can do this, keep in mind, whenever you're blending, you can have as many different points as possible. So you do not necessarily have to just do 3. If you wanted to do 5 and you think that would be easier, or if you think that your lines are getting off as you're going through, that could be another good option for you as well. So same thing again, make. Now you're going to notice that it kind of got a little bit funky. All I'm going to do is take that bottom line and redo and just flip them. So it basically remembers which point you did first, which is kind of funky. Okay, but just notice that on the fly with my white arrow, I can change up any of the points that I selected first, and it'll actually adjust the blend, so which is very, very cool. All right, looks good. Expand. Let's color it. All right, so for this color demo, we are all good to go. So this was basically our inking on the fly. The next one, we are going to basically do our coloring, add our shadows, and then we're also going to add a little bit of a texture pattern to our fill for the teddy bear. So thanks for hanging out, and I will see you on the next tutorial.